You're righty there, fellow mini painters and lovers of all things old hammer related. Welcome to another video from Nostalgiahammer Hobbies. In this video, we are going to be taking another Rogue Trader Classic unit, rescuing them and getting them ready for the Warhammer 40k 2nd edition tabletop. So I do hope you enjoy. This unit is going to be for Richard from Bring About a Wargaming, and it's going to be another unit of Blood Angels for his Blood Angels army that I started from a little while ago. And it's going to be this unit of Terminators. These models were released back in the late 1980s, and they're considered pretty much one of the classic Terminator sculpts that have ever been done. And I've got to say, they hold up really well to the new ones. Now these ones Rich obviously painted quite a while ago, so they're going to need a little bit of love to bring them back up to a nice standard. And to begin with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to strip the paint off, and to do that I'm going to put them in some straight acetone. Now you can only do this with metal models. Do not do it with plastic or resin models, because it will destroy the resin or plastic very, very quickly. And once that happens, then there's no going back. So let's give these boys a little bit of a strip and see where we're at. And as you can see, acetone does a brilliant job at stripping paint off metal models. But again, like I said, do not put plastic or resin models in acetone. It will destroy the models very, very quickly. Anyway, now that they've been stripped, we can see that we've actually got a couple of issues that we're going to have to deal with. One of them is the broken Thunderhammer at the bottom there, which isn't going to be too difficult to sort out. And the other one is the lightning claw down there on the bottom right. That one's had a couple of the tips of the claws actually have been broken off or worn down over time. So we're going to have to try and rebuild and sort those out a little bit. I'm also going to move the storm shields a little bit on the arms, as well as do something to one of the models to turn it into a unit sergeant for Richard. So as you can see, there's going to be a little bit of work involved to bring these boys back up to a nice standard, because they've had a little bit of battle damage over the years, which is just expected, to be honest. So let's grab yourself your cuppa, get to the desk and see how I do. The first repair we've got to do is actually quite a simple one, and it's just attaching one of the arms where one of the fixing nubs has broken off. So all I'm going to use is a little pin vise with an appropriate size drill bit and a bit of paper clip to pin it into place. Now this one isn't usually too difficult to find the spot to actually put the paper clip, because you'll usually see the remainder of the broken off nub. So just use a decent pair of wire snippers. Don't use your Games Workshop model cutters or anything else like that, because you will destroy them when you do that. And then just cut the paper clip to size appropriately and fix it on. It's one of those things that's a fairly simple thing to do. The next repair I'm going to do is going to be the broken Thunderhammer. Now you're going to want to be quite careful when you position the holes to drill and pin these ones in place. So what I used is a very fine pointed needle file. And if you do a lot of metal models, you're probably going to have a set of these. And the one I used was the triangular one. And you can use that to get the hole in place first, and then drill in from that. And then from then on, I would recommend doing a fair few dry runs without gluing it in place with the paper clip, just so you can make sure it is in the right place. And just use your pin vise again and drill it through fairly carefully and slowly as you go until you're in the right position for it and you're happy. And you also don't want to use a lot of super glue when you do this. You want to be quite careful, because it can quite easily blob out over the hole that you've drilled and fill in some detail and make a terrible mess when you do it. So just be careful when you do it, and just make sure you line it up properly when you do very nicely, and look at it from many different angles as you can. And you want to be equally careful when you're gluing in the hammer part of this as well. Again, like I said, do a couple of dry runs just to make sure that you've got it in the right sort of position, it's nice and straight before you glue it. And look at it from as many different angles as you can to make sure that you've got it as lined up as well as you possibly can manage. And there you go. As long as you're patient and careful with it, you can get it into the right position without too much fuss, to be honest. And this repair has worked out fairly well for that one. It doesn't even really need any filling around the base, where I've glued the hammer haft onto the hand as well. It all goes together quite nicely, and just that little tiny bit of super glue has helped to fill the gap out. Now the next one I'm going to do isn't actually a repair. I'm just going to reposition the shield. Now this might be a little bit of a controversial choice, but I noticed that it's just positioned just a little bit oddly for my taste. So I'm going to move the fixing point from his forearm down to this flat bit on his hand. I'm going to use first off a flat needle file to file it off nice and flat so I can drill in and fix a pin, like a bit of a paper clip to hold the shield in place. And there we go, that's just that really pointy needle file that I said I used earlier to help get the guiding hole in ready for when you drill it on such a small piece. If you use a decent quality needle file, you don't really have to worry about bending the tip of these things because they're made for dealing with quite hard metals and lead's quite soft. So just use the tip of that to gouge in little holes, like sort of push it in and twist it round a little bit and you'll get a little hole like that, which will help guide in your drill bit as you're going in. And again, just carefully as you can, just drill this down in with your pin vise and just go carefully with it and you should be alright. And if you've got a decent drill bit, because lead's quite soft, this isn't too difficult to drill through and won't take too long. Now, I've already got the pin fixed to the back of the storm shield. So all I've got to do is just cut the paper clip off to the length that I reckon I need it, as carefully as I can, and just snip it off and then glue it into place hopefully. Now, because this little fixing nub here is quite sturdy, I'm going to use my decent pair of wire cutters. I'm just going to snip it off as close as I can get it. It's still going to leave a little bit like that, but that's alright, because then I'm going to take my needle files and file it down smooth again. And again, it's always a good idea to do a dry run or a dry fit just to make sure that you've got the paper clip cut to the right size or the holes drilled to the right depth before you glue it in properly. And if it is a little bit long, the good thing with having a good set of needle files is that you can just file it down to the length that you need rather than trying to cut it down. So as long as you're careful, you're not snapping it off where you've glued it into place already. And then once you're happy with the positioning you've got, then it's just a simple case of taking your little bit of super glue, as little as possible, remember, so you don't have an accident and make a mess with it, and just glue it into shape and just line it up when you do it. And there we go, that little simple position fixing change changes the shape of the arm a little bit there, I reckon, and looks a little bit better as well. But let me know what you think in the comments, whether or not you think that simple little position change is worth it or not. The final repair I'm going to do is the broken lightning claw, which was missing the two ends off these two here. First one I did off camera to see if I could do it, and it's done with some green stuff and just put on the end and sculpted into shape, and it's not too bad. So I'm going to show you how I did that. First of all, you get a green stuff, mix up. You're only going to need a tiny little bit for this, and it's sort of try and get it into the shape initially that it's going to be. So it's because on this it's not really a lot to replace. In fact, what you can do is compare the two lightning claws together, see how much it's missing. You can see it's not actually too much. Take a small bit of green stuff, and I'm going to take a modelling tool, make sure it's nice and wet on the end of it so that it doesn't stick, and start trying to smooth it out so it goes over the edge of it. Work round. Where it's a bit too much there, I'm going to take a craft knife, and I'm going to try and cut it down to size a little bit. And cut it off and trim it down. It's something which you've just got to be kind of patient with. And just work it on until you're happy with the shape. And it's a bit longer than we want at the minute, but that's alright. We can shorten this down again in a second. There we go. Let's try shortening this off. This is just a patience thing. There we go. And it's roughly shaped. Now what I'm going to do is a bit of a cheat to help squish it into shape. Is I'm going to use a pair of these tweezers, which are closed when you're not squeezing them and open when you squeeze them, so they sort of compress in. And again, make sure this is the end of your tweezers are a little bit wet so it doesn't stick, and you just controlled sort of use it to squish it into shape. This is again quite fiddly. If you're just patient when you do it, there, added that extra little bit of length to the end of it.
And finally, before we get to painting, Rich has asked that this model be done as the Sergeant, and to help show that it is the Sergeant, he's asked that I put a banner pole on it. Now I know the Rogue Trader era captains didn't have banner poles, but for the second edition they did. So I'm going to try and build one from scratch, and for this I'm going to try something a little bit different. I've basically got some bits of Lego to help make a little jig up, so it helps to keep the bits of paperclip to length. Now to check the size, I've already drilled a hole in the top of it there. So you put the paperclip in, and I've got a banner handy to compare the size, which, there you go, it's about right already, because I'm going to be doing something to the top of this banner pole. So what we'll do is I'm going to use this jig here to help hold these paper clips into place. Now I know they're not exactly, there's plenty of wiggle room in here, but we're going to use a bit of blue tack to help hold this into place. You don't need a lot. There we go. I'm happy with that. And that should just help to keep that bit of blue tack still. And we can check it. Now then, instead of having the paper clip just stuck on the top of it like that, I'm going to try something a bit different. But I think that's a little bit much, so we can poke that down a bit more. About there. There we go. I'm happy with that. Fix this into place, like that. And then I'm going to cut my length of paper clip to size. Start by just cutting it in half, basically. Now we do want these to be able to, the super glue to be able to hold these in place a bit better. So we're going to have to rough these edges up a bit. What I'm going to do to help these paper clips key in is I'm going to take a needle file and file the ends a little bit. Let's scratch them up a bit like that. There we go. Do that to both bits of paper clip. Check the size of how long, because that's quite long for the paper clips. And then I'm going to take some super glue and I'm going to put a little blob of it on this junction here, which is part of the reason why we do this, so it's raised up. And we have some super glue activator, which in this rare instance I will actually spray. That's when, there you go, you see why I don't normally spray, because it makes there's a lot of it used. So now what we can do is very carefully take this off so we can glue the other side of it as well. There you go, if you can see it properly. It's got a nice bit of glue holding it into place. We're not going to leave it like this though. We're going to use our needle file now, and we're going to file this down so there's not so much of it there. It's not so much of a blob of glue. Go carefully though, because you don't want to snap the super glue, because we are going to use some green stuff to sculpt on some extra detail to this. So I'm going to use my rounded needle file now to go into these little corners here and just carefully file it, because again you want to be careful not to snap it. Now then, next step that I'm going to do is I'm going to use some green stuff. I'm going to try and make it look like there's a bit of extra material around here to hold it in shape, and make quite a thin bit and basically just put it on here, and then I'm going to try and mold this to the shape that I want. So there we go. Now I will use my sculpting tool to try and move this round into shape, being gentle whilst I do it so as to not snap this super glue. If you feel like you need a bit more, take a little bit more green stuff. Sculpting in green stuff is definitely something I need more practice at. There. With that, what I'm going to do is I'm going to glue it and fix it into place on top of the Terminator in the hole that I've pre-drilled, back when I've got this roughly in place. And there it is, glued into place. Now to add a finishing touch, I've gone to one of the Primaris Marines Blood Angels upgrade sprues that you can buy, and I've got this little skull and wing topper, and I'm going to fix this on top, which is why I have left that tiny little bit longer there, so I can drill into it and fix that one onto the top there. And because these are plastic, these are quite easy to drill into. So I'm just going to drill into the centre of that one, drill into the base of this plastic part so it fits on top of there, with an appropriately sized drill bit from a pin vise. It's always good as well to go for a dry run before you put the parts on. Now that we're happy, glue that into place. There we go. And there's one more thing I wanted to do on the base of it down here, and that is to add a little bit more green stuff, but make it look like it's part of the armour rather than just stuck into it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to basically just squash out a bit of green stuff very thin, and use my knife to sort of cut this to the size that I want, which isn't much to be fair. Just going to straighten it up and take the little bit off that we're going to need, which again isn't going to be much, probably only about that. And then I'm going to put that on the base of the banner pole. And I'm going to move it round it to just make it look like it's a thicker part of the armour. And there we have it. So now all I have to do is let that green stuff cure overnight. And then we are going to cut these to length. And hopefully the blob of super glue in the middle and the green stuff around it will help hold these two cross members into place.
And here we have the two repaired Terminators and the unit Sergeant with the banner pole made up. The Thunderhammer looks pretty decent, actually, with it all glued together. You can't really see any bendiness to it. But the same goes for that lightning claw. I was a little bit dubious about it to begin with, but now that it's been primed up, it actually looks pretty good. And that banner pole also looks quite effective, and I'm quite pleased with it. And when you look in through some older issues of White Dwarf, you can see that some people actually did add banner poles to their captains and stuff like that anyway. So this isn't really that out of time or out of character for the actual model itself. I think it actually looks relatively effective. I still need more practice with it, but it's certainly getting there. And with the other two members of the squad added into it, this unit should be dealing out quite a bit of damage once it's all painted up, and I really do hope Rich enjoys them, and I cannot wait to see them in a battle report. And so now that we've got the repairs done out of the way, let's get to the painting desk and do some painting. And now to painting these. I'm going to paint this one that I've done up as the Sergeant, but I will show bits when I get to doing things like the lightning claws. Now what I have started with is a base coat of Evil Sun Scarlet, and then what I'm going to do is do the black base coat. The black I'm using for this is Vallejo's Game Colour Black. Now I was quite surprised when I started using this one to discover that it's actually got quite a matte finish compared to the GW's paints. So I'm quite curious to see how these ones do. And it's just a case of, as carefully and as neatly as you can, going around, and we'll apply the black, including things like his shield. And because he is the unit sergeant, it will also be his shoulder pad and any other details. With everything that I'm going to do black undercoated, I'm now going to do everything that I'm going to have bone. And for that, it's going to be the Crux Terminatus, which I'm going to do bone, as well as any skulls on him, as well as the skull here, but I'm not going to do the scroll here. I'm going to do the scroll a different colour, as well as the aquila that is on their chests. For this, I'm going to be starting with a base coat of Xandri Dust, and that way we'll have a deeper colour to work with from the start. We'll be able to get a little bit more depth in there. Next thing I'm going to do is the metallics, and there's not that many of them on these old Terminators. So to begin with, I'm just going to take lead belcher. I'm going to do areas like the front part of his helmet here. You've got his little eye piece here, but not all of them have that. And the head of his Thunderhammer, as well as you have the obligatory grills, as well as the vent on the back of his armour. And there you have it with all the lead belcher. Like I said, there's not that much to do on these sculpts that's actually used that colour. And the only other metallic I'm going to use is going to be on the Sergeant, on the top of his banner pole for this one, and that's going to be some Retributor armour. And this one's only actually on the Sergeant for this banner pole conversion that I've done. So if you haven't done this, then you won't actually have any gold to do on these guys. After the metallics have been done, I'm then going to move on and I'm going to start base coating any of the other areas that I'm going to do in white first. And that's just going to be anything that's like on the back of his storm shield, got some cables, as well as you've got the little light in his helmet, and anything else that you can see. For the scroll on the Sergeant's shield, I'm going to base coat that in Rakarth Flesh. This is only because I'm going to do some script on him later, and I'd like it to still look a sort of bony colour, scrolly colour, but without it looking too much like the bone of the skull that's above it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to move on to going over what we've done in white, and I'm going to start by doing any of the areas blue, and I'm going to do those with Kaldor Sky. I'm doing most of the areas under the Thunderhammer like this base colour. I'm also going to do the lightning claws in Kaldor Sky to begin with. Now when it comes to highlighting these lightning claws, there'll be some wet blending involved in that rather than just some edge highlighting, which would be what more involved with things like cables on the Thunderhammer. We'll get to that in a bit. After the blue, I'm going to do the eye sockets, as well as I'm going to do the eye lens on his optic lens here, as well as the cable. And for that, I'm going to use contrast paints Warp Lightning. And I'm just going to paint that into the recess. You don't have to be super neat with it into there. Just kind of, just kind of like fill it into the recess a little bit. The final colour I'm going to do for base coats is Uriel Yellow. And I'm going to do that on the little light that's on the sergeant's helmet, as well as I've done it on the lightning bolts on the lightning claws as well. With the base coats all done, now we're on to the washes stage. And the first one I'm going to do is going to be the most laborious one to do, and that's going to be the recess shading of all the red. And for that, I'm going to use contrast paints Wildwood, and I'm just going to get my thinnest brush I've got, which is a Masterclass brush by Wargamer, and I'm just going to do it as best I can to just paint it directly into the recesses. Now, this isn't something that you can rush, and it will take the longest out of all the other colours to do on this. If you do make a mistake, you can just go in with your Evil Sun Scarlet and clear it, tidy it up. It's not the end of the world. And if you just steadily go around and do it, and have a video on in the background on YouTube, or have some music going or something, before you know it, you'll be done. Back when that very long and tedious part of this paint job is done. Once that Wildwood recess shade has been done, I'm going to do the blue. And for that, I'm going to use an older paint GW used to do, which was a Guilliman Blue Glaze. Now, you can get basically the same as this if you were to quite heavily thin down Talisar Blue from the contrast paint range. And I'm just going to paint this Guilliman Blue over all of the blue and sort of use it like a wash, but guide it into the recesses. And for the lightning claws, what I'm going to do is take the Guilliman Blue, start at the tip of them, and just do it down to the base in one stroke. Try not to put too much on like that, and just work it around like that. Once the blue's been done, I'm then going to use Null Oil on any of the areas that I've done lead belcher. After that, any of the areas that you've done gold, I'm just going to do in Reichland Flesh Shade. And then I'm going to use Agrax Earthshade for the bone, Crux Terminatus, and any other skull or bone details that you've done on the Terminators. As well as I'm going to do it on the scroll on his shield. And then to finish off the washes, I'm going to use contrast paints Eandon Yellow, and I'm just going to put that on anything that you've done yellow. So these little lights here, nice and simple, as well as the lightning bolts on the lightning claw shoulder. What I'm going to do is just paint this in down towards the base of it, like that. Now that we have finished the washes, we are now going to start doing some highlights. And to begin with, I'm going to do the black. And I'm going to do that in two different ways. For things like the black shield, shoulder pads, and like hands and stuff, I'm going to use Thunderhawk Blue. And I'm just going to try and skim across the edge using my brush like that. Go around all your black parts that you can see and do this. And the other black I'm going to highlight is the stuff that's in the joints in his armour. And for that, I'm going to use Dawnstone. And it's just a case of picking them out as best you can. After the two different blacks have been highlighted, the next colour I'm going to highlight is going to be the reds. And this is going to take the longest part out of any of the colours, so it's just a case of taking your time as you do it. And for this one, what I'm using is Vallejo's Orange Fire. It's pretty much the same as Troll Slayer, to be honest. So if you don't have Vallejo, by all means just use that. And it's just a case of, as carefully as you can, going around and picking out the edges of the armour. This is another one that's going to take quite a long time to do, but the best thing to do is, whilst you're doing it, to have a video on or something like that in the background on YouTube whilst you're painting. Doesn't matter if you make a little bit of a mess, you can easily go in with some Evil Sun Scarlet afterwards to tidy it up. And what you want to do is, where you can, turn the model round onto its edge so you can just skim the brush along like that. And then there are certain parts where you're just going to have to, as carefully as you can, follow the lines. And there we go. that is the longest, most tedious part of the highlighting done, with the red armour highlighted. After that, I'm just going to get in and highlight the green. And I'm just going to use some moot green, and as carefully as I can, just paint this over the centre of things like the eye here, put a dot in the centre of the lens, and then the cable here on the side, I'm just going to do my best to pick out the lines that are sculpted onto it. And then to finish up, I'm going to take some pure white and just do a tiny dot of it just in the top corner of this eye lens. Put a tiny dot, as small as I can, right in the centre of the eye of his optical implant. And then for the cabling on the side, just very carefully pick out the very top part of the cable with some little dots. The next colour I'm going to highlight is going to be any of the blue. And to begin with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back in with Caldor Sky and pick out any of the details that we've got and try and leave in the darker areas. I am then going to grab some Lothern blue and highlight more of the edges. And then to finish off the blue on the Thunderhammer and the power cabling behind the shield, I'm going to take some blue horror and just do some smaller dots on the head of the Thunderhammer. And for the cables that are on the side of the Thunderhammer and around the back of the shield, I'm just going to pick out some tiny little bits just on the uppermost areas of them. For the lightning claw, I'm going to do it slightly differently. What I'm going to do is I'm going to start by reapplying a thinned down coat of Caldor Sky over the lightning claw and leave the darker bits left over by the wash. And then I'm going to take very quickly, wash and brush out, and then I'm going to wet blend in some blue horror. Now these two colours I've thinned down more than I normally would do. There you go. And then you want to start working in some more of your blue horror towards the tip. Don't worry if it looks a bit stark like that. What you're going to do is take some more Caldor Sky with it still wet and just work it in over the transition part. And you basically go backwards and forwards between your Caldor Sky and your blue horror until you're happy with the transition. You can take a hairdryer to help it dry a bit quicker. And then if you want to brighten it up, you take some more blue horror, thin it down a little bit more than you normally might do from this point as well, and then start trying to glaze it in towards the tip. And if you work towards the end where you want the colour to be starkest, you'll drag the paint out and it'll collect mostly at the end. And then to finish that off, go for some pure white. I'm just going to pick out the edge. And if you want to, you can thin your white down quite a bit as well and add a little bit glazing it in towards the tip as well to make it look that little bit brighter. And there we go. I'm going to do that on all of the lightning claws on there. We can see what it looks like when it's done. And there you go. Next up, I'm going to do the lightning bolts on the lightning claws shoulder pads. And what I'm going to do for that is start with Uriel Yellow again, and I'm going to work that up from just above the base of the lightning bolts going towards the tip. And then to finish off the yellow lightning bolts, I'm just going to take a little bit of Dawn Yellow and apply that along the edges to the very tip. Almost there. The part we're going to highlight next is going to be the metallics, and I'm going to start with the lead belcher areas. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to jump straight up to Ironbreaker, and I'm just going to pick out the edges and do a little highlight on wherever it's needed. And there we go. That is the lead belcher highlighted. And the last metallic we're going to do, which, like I said earlier, is only on this Sergeant with the banner pole conversion, is the gold. And I'm going to take some Liberator gold, and I'm just going to try and pick out the edges of the wing detail, just by skimming the brush along it like that. And we're almost there. One of the last bits we've got left to highlight is this scroll that I'm doing on his shield. That I'm going to go back in with Rakarth Flesh, and I'm going to thin it down a little bit more than I might normally do. And then I'm just going to reapply it over most of this scroll, working towards where I want it to be brightest. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to build this up over about 2 or 3 thin coats. And then to finish off, I'm going to take some thinned down pallet width flesh and just pick out the edges. And then finally, the last bit of highlighting we've got to do is on the bone skull on his storm shield and the bone crux terminatus that's on his shoulder, and anything else that we've got going on. So to begin with, what I'm going to do is I'm going to start by putting on some Ushakti bone and just leaving the darker recesses untouched. The final highlight I'm going to do on the crux terminatus and other bone areas is some screaming skull, and I'm just going to go in and pick out the tips of any of the detail. And there we go, that's the highlighting done. Now, to finish these off, if you look at the photos of the second edition Blood Angel Terminators out of the Angels of Death Codex, you'll see that the bone iconography has a more richer brown colour to it. And that's done by the fact that back in those days we had something called chestnut ink. We didn't have Agrax Earthshade. So to try and achieve that slightly warmer tone, what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some Seraphim Sepia and I'm just going to paint that over all the bone areas that we've done. And I'm not going to try and paint so much of it like using it like a wash. I'm just going to mostly use it to try and tint the surface that warmer colour. And there you go. With the application of a bit of that Seraphim Sepia, it's added a slightly warmer tone to those bone colours. Now for a final touch, I'm going to try and add a little bit of script onto this scroll here. And I'm going to be using a micron pen for that. I'm just going to try and draw it in. I'm going to do something quite simple. Because they're blood angels, I'm going to try and write Baal. I'm going to try and write it in a bit nicer script. And the good thing with these micron pens is they're not permanent, so you can wipe them off with some water. And it's just a case of going in there and trying to write it down as neatly as you can. There we go. And when you seal that in with a coat of varnish, that's not going to go anywhere. And here is the full unit, all based up and with decals applied. Now I did realise, whilst watching through this video, whilst editing it, that I actually messed up right at the very beginning when I showed the models that needed the repair work done, specifically with the Terminator that needed the lightning claw tips repairing. I put the wrong one in the clip. But looking at these ones, I can't actually see one that's been repaired. So that obviously worked out quite well. The banner was supplied for me by Rich from Bring About Wargaming, and it was done on a much better printer than the one I've got, and you can see how much a better printer makes a difference when you're printing out banners. So I would recommend, if you are going to do that and you want to avoid having to repaint them, to get a quite a decent printer. I think these boys do really bring back second edition 40k memories for me, and they look really cool. I'm really quite pleased with that final paint job, and I hope that Rich is going to like them as well. And I also hope that everyone that's been watching this video is also liking them. And there we go, that brings to a close another Old Hammer Rescue video. I really hope everyone enjoyed these ones. I know I did. I especially had a lot of fun doing that banner pole on the Sergeant, and it worked out quite well and finishes that unit off very nicely. Now, in the description below, there will be a link to my website where you can go and get a quote for any commissions that you may want doing, or look at any galleries. And also, if you enjoyed this video, why not give us a subscribe, hit the bell icon, and then you get notified for whenever I put up another video, which hopefully will be quite soon. So with that, stay smiling and keep the old hammer alive.